Hey guys, tonight, we slip back thousands of years before skyscrapers, before electricity, before even the idea of a weekend, to a place where the desert wind carries secrets, and the stars are not just decoration, but destiny. You are walking barefoot across cracked stone near the banks of the Euphrates River. The air smells of warm dust, drying reeds, and something vaguely burnt, probably whatever the guy in the next tent tried to cook. Above you, the night sky unfolds like a scroll, and for once, there's no light pollution. Every star pulses like it's trying to say something. In the distance, torchlight flickers against the mud brick walls of Babylon. You slip past sleeping goats and the occasional guard snoring through his shift. Your destination, the small raised courtyard of a temple school where a handful of men are hunched over clay tablets. Not books, tablets. Warm, soft, slightly squishy rectangles of clay, which will later be baked into permanence. One of them looks up, nods at you and motions you closer. He's carving symbols into the clay with a stylus tiny wedges pressed in careful sequence. At first, it looks like abstract art, but then you realize it's a map of the stars. You blink, a map of the sky on dirt. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You watch as he carves a tiny symbol that looks suspiciously like a fish, or maybe a water jug. The truth is, nobody really knows what the earliest constellations looked like. Some of them survived through Greek translation and later into your horoscope app. Others lost, gone like vapor under the sun. You sit beside him as the clay cools. His name is Idin Sin, which loosely translates to the moon god has given. He's a priest, a scholar, and a man who hasn't had a day off in 12 years. But he's happy because tonight he saw a rare conjunction, Mars and Venus almost touching. That doesn't just make for a romantic sky, it's a sign of what he's not sure yet. But the king will definitely want to know. The stars matter here. They aren't just beautiful, they're powerful. The Babylonians believed the gods wrote messages in the heavens, and it's up to priests like Idin Sin to read them before something terrible or wonderful happens. You glance at the sky. There's no telescope, no lens, no zoom. Just your eyes and patience. And Idin Sin has both. He points out constellations, some familiar, some not. The Plough instead of the Big Dipper. The Swallow instead of Pisces. Stars that signal the planting season. Stars that whisper of invasion. And yes, stars that tell you when to take your goats to market. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians invented astrology for science, religion, or political control. Maybe it was all three. But we do know this, they were among the first to systematically record celestial movements. Not just look up and go, "Who pretty," but to write it down, predict, archive. And what did they use clay? Not just because it was abundant, not just because papyrus hadn't made it up the Nile yet, but because once you scratch something into wet clay and fire it, it lasts. Thousands of years, in fact. You could drop your iPhone in a stream tomorrow and lose everything. But a Babylonian tablet, still readable, still whispering across time. You get a little closer and peer at the lines. He's drawn a simple grid, vertical and horizontal lines crisscrossing to mark the sky's layout. Each star cluster gets a symbol and a note. Some tablets track lunar phases. Others record planetary paths. A few even mention comets, though one tablet refers to a comet as the tail of the sky dragon, which sounds much cooler, honestly. Here's your mainstream fact. The Babylonian star catalog, known as the Mulapin, compiled around 1000 BCE, contains some of the earliest known astronomical observations, including the names and movements of constellations still recognized today. Now for your quirky tidbit. One Babylonian tablet describes a star that dances madly and foams like beer. Scholars think it may have been a supernova, or a scribe who had one too many. The priest leans back, stretches, and hands the stylus to a young apprentice. It's your turn, apparently. You press the reed into the clay slowly, hesitantly. It's not just writing. It's carving the sky into the earth. The wind rustles your robe. You look up again. You might feel small alone in this ancient world, with no electricity, no Wi-Fi, no fast food. But here's your reality check. Even if you had the best GPS on Earth, you still couldn't find your way out of this timeline. The past isn't always welcoming. You probably wouldn't survive long. Not unless you really liked lentils. And yet here you are, marking the stars, etching permanence into clay. The torch sputters, the sky shifts, time to move on. You're still sitting beside Idunsin, your hands a little dusty, your stylus smeared with fine clay. The night presses in, warm but vast, and the stars above you blink without blinking. It's hard to explain, but they feel deliberate, as if the sky has been arranged not for beauty, but for meaning. And here in Babylon, that meaning's everything. You turn to Idunsin and ask the obvious question an anytime traveler might ask. Why? Why are you all so obsessed with the stars? He chuckles, not unkindly, then motions you to look up again. The gods are watching, he says softly, almost like a bedtime warning. And they write their thoughts in the sky. You gulp, slightly. To the Babylonians, the cosmos wasn't just a scientific curiosity. It was a living divine manuscript. Every star was the eye of a god. Every movement meant something: favor, warning, anger, blessing. The heavens weren't distant, they were intimate, and often terrifying. You glance back down at the tablet. The marks you made earlier now feel a bit like graffiti on sacred stone. Here's the thing: in ancient Babylon, everything was connected to the divine. If the Tigris flooded too soon, or if a crop failed, or if the king tripped walking up temple steps, it wasn't bad luck. It was a sign, a cosmic memo. Something was out of balance, and the gods were trying to say so. That's where people like Idunsin came in. He wasn't just tracking stars, he was interpreting divine grammar. The sky was the script, and priests were the translators. If Mars suddenly sped across the sky, war. If Venus disappeared for a while, romance maybe. Or betrayal? Historians still argue whether they treated these signs literally or symbolically. You're guessing both. Mainstream fact-time Babylonian priests were among the first to use star positions for divinatory purposes, laying the groundwork for what would become astrology, not just mapping the heavens, but interpreting them to make predictions. And the predictions mattered, not just for farmers and shepherds, but for kings. Entire campaigns were delayed or launched based on what the stars suggested. You imagine some poor general fully armored sweating in the sun, just waiting for Saturn to finish its awkward little loop through Sagittarius. Even naming things carried spiritual weight. The Babylonians didn't just give stars names, they gave them roles. The star we now know as Sirius. To them, it was linked to the god Ninurta, who brought order from chaos. Jupiter Marduk, the supreme deity ruler of storms and justice. Watching Jupiter wasn't astronomy. It was divine surveillance. Idunsin begins reciting something eyes closed. It sounds like poetry, but you recognize words: Ishtar, Shamash, Nergal, gods of love, sun, and the underworld respectively. Stars, too. Every celestial body was tethered to myth, identity, personality. You weren't just reading stars. You were reading characters in an eternal soap opera, one that might accidentally smite you if you weren't paying attention. Suddenly, a rustling sound. Another priest appears panicked. He whispers something to Idunsin, and they both rush to a new tablet. You follow naturally. Apparently, a comet has been spotted. Bad omen. Always is. They'll need to consult earlier tablets, see if there's a precedent. Maybe there's a ritual to offset the threat. Maybe the king needs to be warned. You look at the comet again, barely visible, a faint smear across the dark velvet sky. But to these men, it's a divine exclamation point. Here's your quirky tidbit. One Babylonian tablet describes a comet as a star with a tail that bites the moon. It's poetic, creepy, and delightfully vague. You wonder aloud, what if nothing actually happens? What if these signs don't mean anything? Eden Sin sighs. Maybe. But would you rather be surprised? He has a point. The deeper you go into Babylonian sky watching, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just mysticism. It was strategy. If the gods were angry and the signs warned you and you didn't act, that was negligence. Cosmic negligence. And nobody wants to be that guy. You begin to see how belief and knowledge were braided together here. No clean divide between science and religion. One gave shape to the other. Even today, scholars still can't agree where astrology ends and astronomy begins in Babylonian thought. A slow breeze lifts the edge of your tunic. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks at a goat. Probably thinks it's a lion again. You step back from the scribes and look around. This world feels ancient, yes, but it also feels alive. It's people driven by the same fears and hopes you carry: love, death, survival. Meaning, the only difference you have, Google. They had stars. You glance up once more. No planes, no satellites, no pollution, just clarity. The gods still watching. You wake, or maybe just shift in your half-sleep to the sound of something scraping. A stylus carving once more. The fire has burned low, casting long flickering shadows against the temple walls. Eden Sin is back at it again, hovering over a fresh clay tablet. This time, though, the symbols don't seem random. They're in columns, structured, tidy like a ledger. You rub your eyes. What's he recording now? You whisper to the apprentice beside you, who is somehow already wide awake and eating something that smells like overcooked lentils. The apprentice smirks. He's counting time. Now that your eyes adjust, you see it. On this new tablet, the symbols aren't just constellations or star names. They're dates, times, intervals. Some lines mark days between moon phases. Others track how long Venus disappears before rising again. The Babylonians weren't just stargazing. They were building AM calendar of the cosmos. This, you realize, is how they organized their entire world. Time itself came from the sky. Here's your mainstream fact. Babylonian astronomers were among the first to use lunar solar calendars, balancing the moon's 29.5-day cycle with the sun's annual motion to create a system that guided festivals, agriculture, and taxation. Pretty much everything ran on cosmic time. Take the new moon. To you, it's that dark patch you forget to notice. But here, it's everything. Planting and harvest debts, owed sacrifices, made it all hinges on the phases of the moon. You miss one. You're not just late. You're cursed. And then there's the solstices. Twice a year, the sun hits its extremes, either hanging low like it's about to give up, or blazing overhead like it's trying to torch your eyebrows. These moments sacred. They marked transitions. Times of ritual fear and hope. You get the sense that every sunrise, every flicker of moonlight, was another divine appointment waiting to be deciphered. But here's the real kicker. They didn't just observe a time, they calculated it. Using clay tablets, they tracked lunar eclipses, noted planetary retrogrades, and worked out time intervals with stunning precision. Now brace yourself for some nerdy math. The Babylonians used a base 60 to a sexagesimal system, not base 10 like we do today. 60 might sound strange, but it divides evenly by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It made astronomy and splitting time into manageable pieces remarkably efficient. It's why we still have 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle. So yeah, next time you're late for a meeting, you can blame some Babylonian priest who thought base 10 is for chumps. You squint at one line that repeats month of the barley cutting over and over again. Turns out barley harvests were cosmic events, not because the gods loved porridge, though who doesn't, but because barley meant taxes, trade, and survival. The scribes timed their reports around such agricultural markers, ensuring the empire didn't starve or revolt. Here's your quirky tidbit. One tablet mentions an eclipse occurring during the month when the king's beard itches. Scholars still argue whether this was a joke, a mistranslation, or a very specific seasonal allergy. As the apprentice explains this to you between mouthfuls, you start to grasp how vast this system really was. Time wasn't abstract, it was tactile. You could press your thumb into it, shape it, fire it, store it in a dusty archive for centuries. That's what these tablets were, memory anchors. Time made permanent. You wonder aloud, how did they know when an eclipse was coming? Eden Sin looks up from his clay and grins. Sometimes we guess. Sometimes we just get lucky. But he's being modest. In truth, Babylonian scribes developed mathematical models based on past observations. One of their most famous discoveries was the Saros cycle, an 18-year pattern that helped them predict eclipses with shocking accuracy. They didn't understand the orbital mechanics, but they noticed the pattern, and they wrote it down, again and again, on clay. Historians still argue whether they truly understood these cycles, or simply copied them blindly from previous scribes. But either way, the data stuck, and now it's ours. You look again at the symbols. They seem so fragile, like they might crumble under your gaze. And yet, they're stronger than most of what we write today. That tweet you posted yesterday, gone in 24 hours. This dusty tablet, still here, after 2,500 years. You reach out gently, running your fingers over the grooved marks. Some are clean, others smudged by time, but everyone is a heartbeat, a decision, a record of what mattered most in that moment. And in a strange way, that matters to you too. Your fingers linger on the clay, still warm from the fire. You lift one of the tablets, surprisingly heavy, almost like a small brick, and cradle it in both hands. The surface is rough, marked by decades of handling, yet the symbols remain. Deep wedges, precise strokes, tiny arcs each one, the echo of a long-dead scribe who sat just where you are now. You tilt the tablet toward the firelight. There, etched cleanly along its edge, is a star map. Not a chart in the modern sense. There are no compass roses or latitude lines, just names, shapes, relationships. A record of what the sky looked like on a particular night to a particular observer in a world where the sky wasn't just something above you. It was everything. This is the part that hits you. These tablets, these modest lumps of fired mud, are the earliest surviving star maps we know of. The Babylonians weren't just looking at the stars, they were trying to capture them. Mainstream fact time. The earliest known star map is the MUL.APN series, dating to around 1000 BCE. It catalogs constellations, their risings and settings, and even how they relate to seasonal activities like farming or military campaigns. You turn it over carefully. The back bears a few smudges, a thumbprint maybe. You imagine the scribe sneezing mid-sentence, cursing, then shrugging and handing it off to be baked anyway. Even back then, perfection was overrated. But what really amazes you is the permanence. These tablets were meant to last. Once dried and fired, the information was essentially fossilized. Not in paper, not on vellum, but in clay, something even older than writing itself. And in a weird twist of fate, that's probably the only reason we know about any of this. In ancient cities like Nineveh and Sippar, tablets were stored in libraries, sometimes stacked floor to ceiling, in archives that would eventually be buried under sand, ash, and time. When war came, or when an empire collapsed, everything burned. Papyrus gone, wood gone. But clay survives fire. Sometimes it even hardens in it. You shift uncomfortably as you sit on a stone bench, thinking about how many other tablets might still be buried out there waiting. Messages from the stars locked in mud. The apprentice offers you another smaller tablet. This one's different. Instead of a broad map, It focuses on a single constellation, something like the Hired Man, their version of Orion. The scribe had carefully noted its rise and fall dates, how its appearance marked the beginning of lambing season, and somewhat ominously, its link to the arrival of pestilence from the west. You raise an eyebrow? Do you think they believed the stars caused disease? Idun Sin leans in. Not caused, warned. And this you realize is key. To us, astronomy and astrology are separate. One's science, one's superstition. But in ancient Babylon, there was no such division. The stars were information. If bad things tended to happen when a certain planet showed up, that was enough. Write it down. Warn the king. Maybe sacrifice a goat or two just in case. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians believed these correlations or simply used them as early probability models. Either way, their data was surprisingly consistent. And speaking of fringe tidbits, one obscure tablet describes a black sun that swallowed the moon and made cows birth snakes. To be fair, cows were probably just giving birth to very squirmy calves. But hey, snakes are more exciting. As the night deepens, the stars overhead seem to shift. You notice it now. The slow arc of the heavens almost imperceptible, like the earth itself is breathing. And in your lap rests a stone map of that movement, scratched into clay by someone who watched it just as carefully as you are now. There's something humbling about that. You glance back at the shelves along the temple walls. Dozens, maybe hundreds of similar tablets rest there. Some labeled, some cracked, some so ancient even the priests don't read them anymore. And yet, they remain. A celestial memory bank, a backup drive made of earth. The apprentice picks up a stylus and starts copying one of your older scribbles. We always make a copy, he says, in case this one breaks. That's the thing about clay, durable, yes, but brittle. Like knowledge itself, you stretch your arms and look once more at the stars. They haven't changed. Not really. The same constellations rise and fall. The same planets loop and dance. And even now, people watch them. From observatories, from backyards, from the windows of spaceships. But it all began here, with a lump of clay, a reed stylus, and the quiet conviction that if you wrote down the stars, you might just understand the gods. You're starting to get the hang of this clay tablet's star symbols, divine warnings. But tonight, something's different. There's tension in the air like a thread stretched too tight. Even the goats are quiet, which is suspicious in itself. Idun Sin paces near the ziggurat steps, his eyes darting between the horizon and a freshly carved tablet he clutches like a bad lottery ticket. You finally ask what's happening. He sighs long and slow. Jupiter is rising early. That could be bad. You blink. But it's just Jupiter. He looks at you like you've just said fire is kind of warm. In Babylon, planets weren't just planets. They were personal, living, breathing representations of gods. And Jupiter, or Marduk as he was known, was a big deal. He wasn't just the chief deity. He was the ultimate enforcer of cosmic justice. His movement across the sky could signal a royal birth, an empire's collapse, or the need for a really awkward letter to the king. Mainstream fact. The Babylonians tracked the motion of 5 visible planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, associating each with a deity and assigning profound importance to their behavior. Jupiter's cycles were especially crucial in royal astrology. Tonight, Jupiter's ahead of schedule. Its rising doesn't match the expected pattern. To a modern astronomer, it might just mean a slight variation in orbital math. But to Idun Sin, it means something's coming. And the fact that no one knows what is the problem. You watch as he records the moment on a fresh tablet, time, date, brightness, even the color of the sky. There's no telescope here, remember? Just sharp eyes and lots of squinting. The tablet will be archived and cross-checked against earlier ones. Maybe a pattern will emerge. Maybe not. And that's the dangerous part. When planets get unpredictable, kings get nervous. Because here's the weird truth, these star maps weren't made just for curiosity. They were tools of political influence. You're led inside a small torchlit chamber, lined with tablets sealed in clay envelopes. That's right, envelopes. Before paper mail, Babylonians wrapped their clay notes in more clay stamped with seals to prevent tampering. Inside, confidential messages about the stars. Most were meant for royal eyes only. One such message to the king: Jupiter rises in the east, Saturn recedes. Expect change in the house of the lion. Sounds poetic, right? What it meant was, don't buy a new palace right now. Maybe wait and see if your cousin is going to start a rebellion first. Here's your quirky tidbit: 1 tablet records that when Venus disappeared for 3 nights, the king was told to next sleep in a different room and avoid eating onions. Why onions? No one knows. Historians still argue whether it was symbolic purification or just a very specific dietary superstition. You ask Idin Sin how often his predictions come true. He shrugs. Sometimes. But it's not about being right. It's about being ready. That hits different. You follow him up a narrow staircase to a viewing platform near the top of the ziggurat. From here, the city spreads below like a faded mosaic, dusty rooftops. Tiny torch fires the winding silver of the canal. Above, the sky opens wide, and right on cue, Jupiter glows on the edge of the horizon, rising like a slow golden eye. The priests fall silent. Even the chatterbox apprentice is hushed. It's hard to explain, but the moment feels sacred. You lean on the cool stone ledge and stare. The stars look exactly the same as they did an hour ago. But now you understand. This isn't just stargazing. This is listening, waiting for the cosmos to speak. Of course, not everyone believed in this celestial micromanagement. Some citizens likely saw it as nonsense. Historians still argue whether astrology was truly believed by the population, or was more of a control mechanism, something rulers used to justify decisions already made. Either way, the stars had power, real or not. Idin Sin finally speaks. Jupiter moved early before the plague hit Sipar, and again before the Queen Mother fell from her chariot. You glance at the tablet again. It's not flashy, it's not beautiful, but it's evidence. A clue in a cosmic crime scene. Somewhere down in the temple library, thousands of such clues wait, rows of baked clay covered in symbols that once warned a king, terrified a priest, or convinced someone to skip onions for a week. You look at Jupiter once more, burning cold above the desert, and you realize these aren't just stories. They're warnings carved in stone. Messages left for anyone curious or desperate enough to read them. The temple is quieter than usual the next morning. There's a certain heaviness in the air, like the city itself is holding its breath. You sit in the shade of a colonnade, nibbling on a fig that tastes oddly like sand, and watch a group of scribes huddle around a low table, whispering and exchanging clay tablets like they're playing some very ancient, very dusty version of poker. Idin Sin finally waves you over, beckoning with ink-stained fingers. Come, he says. Today you learn how the stars are tamed. You raise an eyebrow. Tamed. He chuckles. With math. You follow him into the temple school, an airy chamber filled with rows of smooth stone benches and low tables. The walls are scrawled with number grids, planetary diagrams, and what appears to be a crude drawing of a goat screaming at the moon. You're hoping that's a joke. Probably not. This is where the real work happens. Not prophecy, not mysticism, but calculation. Mainstream fact: Babylonian astronomers were the first known people to apply systematic mathematics to celestial movements, including linear and step functions that helped predict the positions of planets and eclipses well over 1,000 years before modern trigonometry. You sit beside a young scribe who's furiously scribbling tiny wedge-shaped numbers into a fresh clay slab. His name is Nabuzer, and he's been training for 12 years. He's got the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's forgotten what sleep feels like. What are you working on, you ask? Lunar eclipse timing tables, he mutters. And also, I think I've forgotten how to blink. You peek at his tablet. It's a grid of numbers, rows and rows of intervals and dates, all calculated using the base 60 system. It's mesmerizing. Like watching someone do calculus with a rock and a prayer. Here's your quirky tidbit. Because they didn't have a 0 as a placeholder, Babylonian scribes sometimes used extra spaces between numbers, which meant on more than one occasion, a missing gap led to someone misreading 36 as 3600. Imagine thinking Mars would return in a week. And it actually meant 3 generations. Idin Sin begins his lesson. To predict an eclipse, you must know the moon's cycle, 29.5 days. But it doesn't always line up. You must adjust, add leap months, track shadows. You nod slowly, pretending to follow. It's like watching someone do astrophysics with pottery, but somehow it worked. Over centuries, they refined their methods. They noticed patterns, long repeating cycles like the Saros cycle, which predicted eclipses every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. They didn't know why it worked. They just knew it did. Historians still argue whether these scribes truly understood celestial mechanics, or were simply recording repeating phenomena and applying empirical rules. But one thing's clear, they were meticulous, obsessed even. Nabazir pauses his writing. It's like fishing, he says. We cast our nets into the sky. Sometimes we catch a pattern. Sometimes just air. That might be the most poetic thing you've heard all day. The temple school is full of these quiet geniuses. Boys raised to watch record compute. They aren't guessing. They're building systems, manuals, sky algorithms passed down across generations. You take a closer look at the stylus. It's just a sharpened reed. Yet in their hands, it's a tool more precise than any quill. Every press into the clay is intentional. Every column of numbers could mean a better harvest, a prepared city, a reassured king. You find one table marked with a strange symbol, a circle split with a horizontal line. Turns out it's a marker for an predicted solar eclipse. The scribe who made it lived over 2,500 years ago. His notes even specify which month the sun would bite itself, darkening midday. And sure enough, it happened exactly as he wrote. Of course, not every prediction hit the mark. Some eclipses were late. Some never came. And when they didn't, you can bet the king wasn't thrilled. Here's where things get slightly dangerous. If the math didn't match reality, the blame didn't go to the heavens. It went to the scribes. Mistake was not a word you wanted in your job performance review, and so they double-checked, triple-checked. Copy after copy, tablet after tablet. You're shown a set of backup archives, rows of duplicate tables, each one created by a different apprentice. No two were ever allowed to compare notes directly. That way, if 2 predictions matched, you had confidence. If they didn't, time to ask the gods for forgiveness and possibly a transfer to goat duty. You wander toward the edge of the school where the air grows cooler and the light dimmer. Here, older tablets rest. Cracked, faded, forgotten. Some have been worn smooth by centuries of handling. One bears only a faint trace of what might have once been a star name or maybe someone's lunch list. Hard to say. You pause. Listen. The room feels like a whisper. The hum of centuries. The quiet persistence of minds that refused to look away from the sky even when it made no sense. Even when it changed without warning. Back outside, the sun hangs low and Venus glimmers faintly in the west. Nabuzir joins you, rubbing his eyes. You still think it's all superstition, he asks. You shake your head. I think it's math with a lot of poetry on top. He grins. That's what I thought. The sky is just starting to bleed orange by the time you reach the base of the ziggurat, that towering step pyramid of mud brick that looms over Babylon like a cosmic ladder. You've passed it a dozen times by now, but tonight's different. Tonight, you're going up. Don't trip, Idin Sin warns dryly, unless you want to meet the gods early. You smirk. That's encouraging. Each level is broader than you expect. like ascending a wedding cake built by serious introverts with a thing for geometry. As you climb, the city shrinks beneath your feet, bustling markets, whispering canals, the tiny flickers of oil lamps in windows. But the sky grows. By the time you reach the top, it's fully night. Crisp, vast, silent. The Milky Way spills across the heavens like a dust trail left by divine travelers. There are no clouds, no streetlights, just stars. So many it's almost dizzying. Idin Sin gestures around the platform. This is where we observe the heavens without interruption. It's not just about clarity, it's about reverence. And now you see it, ziggurats weren't just temples. They were observatories. Not the kind with domes and telescopes, but open-air sanctuaries where humans came as close to the divine as possible. Mainstream fact: Babylonian priests used high platforms like ziggurats and temple rooftops as observation towers, marking celestial risings, settings, and transits with naked eye precision. Here the mood shifts. The scholarly hum of the temple is replaced by quiet awe. You aren't just tracking objects anymore. You're bearing witness. And you're not alone. Several others gather: priests, scribes, a few curious locals. There's something communal about this. Everyone looks up. A hush falls as a planet appears, reddish, pulsing faintly. Mars, or as they call it, Nergal, the god of war plague, and just general unpleasantness. Someone murmurs, "He rises angry tonight." You're not sure how they know that, but nobody laughs. The night is too still, the sky too full. Even the apprentice from the temple school is here, wide-eyed, and holding a tablet close to his chest like a shield. This is the people's astronomy. Less math, more myth, but no less powerful. You hear a nearby whisper. Last time Mars rose like that, the eastern walls fell. Someone else. The river ran red. You glance down at the Euphrates, which looks fairly brown at the moment, but decide not to mention it. Here's your quirky tidbit 1. Babylonian tablet claims Mars's brightness increased so greatly that birds fell from the sky. Likely a poetic exaggeration, or a very unfortunate pigeon incident. Historians still argue whether these public viewings were religious rituals, scientific gatherings, or a clever way to maintain royal authority by staging regular sky shows. Maybe they were all three. Tonight you realize something important. The Babylonians weren't just interested in predicting the sky. They were invested in experiencing it. These gatherings were performances, spiritual ceremonies, social glue. In a world full of unpredictable floods, wars, and diseases, the stars were one thing that seemed to follow a pattern. And if you could understand that pattern, maybe you could understand everything. The sky shifts again. A long streak of silver slices the dark, a meteor burning fast and gone in seconds. Gasps ripple through the crowd. A child clutches her mother. Someone mutters a prayer. Idin Sin simply nods. Another messenger. You lean on the stone railing, staring up. It's mesmerizing, peaceful, but also intimidating. The stars feel vast, ancient, and indifferent. Yet the Babylonians dared to make sense of them anyway. That audacity is almost comforting. You think of the tablets, the careful records, the predictions, the whispered warnings, all of them born here under this very sky. It's strange, isn't it, that the foundations of modern science and superstition both trace back to a bunch of mud bricks, some torches, and a priest squinting at Saturn. One final murmur drifts through the group. He will dream of lions. You glance at Idin Sin, who? The king. And just like that, the crowd begins to disperse, as if that answered everything. You're left wondering whether that dream will mean a new law, a canceled campaign, or just some really dramatic lion-based poetry. The apprentice lingers beside you. Not bad for your first real night. You nod, dazed. Not bad at all. He smiles. Wait until the eclipse. Then he disappears down the stairs, the soft thud of his sandals echoing like a heartbeat. You remain a little longer, letting the cool stone seep into your arms as you lean forward. The stars are still there, Quiet, distant, but somehow more familiar, and tomorrow someone will write them down. Dawn creeps into the city of Babylon with a dusty golden glow warming the stone walls and shimmering across the Euphrates like molten bronze. You awaken on a woven mat beneath a linen canopy temple, birds chirping above you and your head still buzzing with stars. The city below is alive, markets opening, donkeys braying the distant clatter of bronze on clay. But inside the temple walls, it's quiet. The kind of quiet that suggests something is brewing. Idin Sin finds you sipping a questionable cup of barley drink and gives you that familiar brace yourself look. Today we travel, he says. You blink. Where? To see where our stars have wandered. You follow him beyond the gates of the temple, out through the city's eastern arch, and into a caravan trail that hums with voices in dozens of dialects. Babylon wasn't just a city. It was a crossroads, a meeting place of cultures, traders, pilgrims, and ideas. And its star maps. They didn't stay put. Mainstream fact: Babylonian astronomy influenced civilizations far beyond Mesopotamia, especially the Greeks who adopted their planetary models and zodiac system. Much of what we now call Western astrology is rooted in Babylonian concepts transmitted via trade and conquest. You walk for hours, maybe days. Time blurs. Dates weren't always fixed here. Calendars adjusted to the moon's moods, and sometimes people did too. You stop in a small town near the border of Assyria, where a scroll merchant offers you something unexpected. Not a clay tablet, but a papyrus filled with strange diagrams and half-Greek inscriptions. Star maps, familiar names, but written differently. You sit with a young scholar who explains these came from Babylon, yes, but we adjusted them, refined, interpreted. In his version, Aries is a ram, thankfully not biting the moon, and Virgo's a maiden with wheat. There are 12 divisions, each tied to parts of the year, and it all sounds hauntingly familiar, because it is. This is the wool birth of the zodiac, not as a loose grouping of myths, but as a structured celestial wheel, each sign linked to specific months, personalities, and portents. And yes, this is the ancestor of your horoscope app. You feel strangely betrayed and also oddly impressed. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians originally used 12 signs for prediction or merely as observation markers. But by the time the Greeks got their hands on it, the zodiac became personal, portable, and profitable. Here's your quirky tidbit in one early adoption of Babylonian star lore. A Greek tablet warns that anyone born under a swollen moon in the archer's path would grow excessive eyebrows and a dangerous sense of humor. You feel personally attacked. You wander through a small archive, thumbing through worn scrolls, noting that the symbols are now rounder looped, almost delicate. No more wedge-shaped cuneiform. No more clay. It's ink and parchment, now faster to write, easier to burn. You feel a pang of loss. Still, it's extraordinary. The stars of Babylon have traveled. They've sailed on Phoenician ships, marched with Persian armies, and ridden on the backs of Greek philosophers. Some made it to India, perhaps influencing Jyotisha. Others whispered their way into Roman rituals. And eventually, they found their way into modern calendars, almanacs, and fortune cookies. Idin Sin sits beside you, a little winded, sipping date wine from a carved gourd. I knew the stars wouldn't stay, he says quietly, but I hoped they'd still be ours. And in a way they are. Every time someone today checks a moon phase app, reads a birth chart, or wonders what Mercury retrograde actually means, they're echoing a Babylonian habit, a need to find pattern in chaos, meaning in the sky. Even now, the language of the stars remains stubbornly familiar. We still speak of Mars as War Venus, as love, Saturn as restriction. We still read the heavens when we feel lost. We still want the universe to have a plan, even if we don't understand it. You look at a scroll labeled simply Table of Omens. It lists dreams, planetary alignments, lunar eclipses. You read If Jupiter and the moon share the sky on the third night, a child born that day will bring fortune to foreign lands. You smile. Could be nonsense. Could be destiny. That's the magic of it. One last merchant offers you a trinket, a small clay disc, carved with zodiac symbols. He calls it a charm, a protection. He says it remembers the stars even when the sky is cloudy. You take it, turning it over in your hand, the same way someone thousands of years ago once held a clay tablet and wondered if the gods were listening. And maybe they still are. Back in Babylon, the temple feels warmer, brighter, more alive. Though maybe that's just your sunburn talking. The journey was long, but now you understand just how far the Babylonian stars have traveled, and how much they got right and, well, wrong. You're seated once more beside Idun Sin in the temple's archive hall, flipping through tablets like cosmic trading cards. Some are chipped, others look barely used, and one smeared with what you hope is lentil soup has 3 stars drawn into a triangle with a caption that translates loosely, "As the fish god smiles here." You don't ask. It's time to take stock. The Babylonians were brilliant. Yes, but they were also deeply human. Let's start with the winds. Mainstream fact: Babylonian scribes could predict lunar eclipses with surprising accuracy. Using their observational data and cyclical models, they tracked lunar phenomena centuries in advance, sometimes down to the very day. That's impressive, especially when you consider their equipment included 0 telescopes and lots of squinting. You examine one tablet that marks a full cycle of Venus's disappearance and return over 8 years. They noticed the cycle repeated itself with eerie precision. Venus, the bright morning or evening star, was special linked to Ishtar, goddess of love and war. When she vanished, things got complicated. Another tablet shows a neat grid predicting Mars's retrograde motion, a strange loop in the sky that baffles even modern stargazers when first seen. The Babylonians not only noted the pattern, they used it to warn of military disasters. Was that causation coincidence? Historians still argue whether their pattern-based astronomy was true science or superstition dressed in data. Then, the less accurate stuff. You hold up a clay tablet that claims Saturn's disappearance behind a cloud causes goats to birth twins, but only in villages west of the canal. Another says a comet seen during a lunar eclipse means the left hand of the king shall tremble and drop the royal meat. One assumes that means dinner. Maybe. Here's your quirky tidbit. One record confidently asserts that if a pig enters the temple uninvited on a day when Mars is bright, the rain will fall sideways and demons shall ride it. Scholars believe this is either metaphor, satire, or the world's first written fever dream. The truth is, even within their own ranks, Babylonian scholars disagreed. Some records refute others. A prediction in Uruk might clash with one in Nippur. One priest may swear that a conjunction foretells prosperity, while another recommends immediate exile. As you might expect, divine interpretation leaves a little room for creative flair, and yet their courage in facing the unknown is admirable. Remember, this was a time without electricity, clocks, or computers. They were building a model of the universe out of stars, dreams, and patient observation. Idun Sin shows you a rare tablet from his private collection. It bears no symbols, just a single carved circle surrounded by short lines. It's not a star chart, he says. It's a map of belief. Each line represents a different theory, a different hope. You know, he murmurs sometimes we got it wrong, but not because the stars lied, because we read them too fast. You sit in silence with that for a moment. It's easy to laugh at the idea of goats forecasting eclipses or pigs channeling spirits. But how different are we really? You have apps that claim to predict your romantic compatibility based on your birthday. The tools have changed, but the hunger hasn't. We still crave patterns, explanations, cosmic reassurance. You step outside into the temple courtyard. Night is falling again, and the stars return to their posts like loyal scribes. Venus blinks first, then Mars, than a scatter of anonymous glitter. The air is cool finally. A soft wind stirs the reeds along the canal. You watch as a younger priest lays out a fresh tablet, his hands steady, eyes focused. He's preparing for tomorrow. You think about how many tomorrows have passed since the first scribe scratched a star into clay and dared to say, "I see meaning in this." And maybe, just maybe, they were right. The final night comes quietly, almost like the sky knows it's time to end the story. You find yourself back at the riverside near the temple feet, dangling over warm stone, the Euphrates murmuring softly as it slips by. The city is mostly asleep. A few distant lanterns sway in upper windows. Somewhere, someone plays a mournful tune on a stringed instrument, thin and hollow, like the night itself. You're not alone. Eden Sin sits beside you, legs crossed, his robe tucked under weathered knees. Between you lies a small clay tablet freshly pressed and blank, still warm from the fire. It's waiting. "I saved one for you," he says simply. You smile, fingers hesitating over the surface. "What do I write?" He shrugs. "Whatever you remember." You think about that, about the stars, the ziggurat, the scribe who forgot to blink, the scroll merchant with stolen symbols, the eclipse math, the fish god, the pig demon. You think of how strange and beautiful it is that humans, so small and squishable, have spent thousands of years trying to map the heavens with mud. Mainstream fact. Hundreds of Babylonian star tablets have been discovered in modern-day Iraq, many housed in museums today. Some even helped modern astronomers confirm the dates of historical celestial events. The stars overhead blink patiently unchanged since the first time you saw them. You press your stylus gently into the clay, carving one simple shape, a triangle of dots. A constellation of your own. Eden Sin nods approvingly. That one will do. Then he gestures toward a far-off wall of the temple. Not a grand hall. Not a sealed archive. Just a quiet alcove where tablets are stored, forgotten or waiting. He adds yours to the shelf. No ceremony, just inclusion. You sit back watching the shadows crawl across the stone and wonder how many messages were lost, how many discoveries, predictions, questions and jokes were erased by time. How much we'll never know. And then he shows you something different. It's not a tablet. It's broken, curved, like a half bowl made of dark stone, polished and marked with tiny scratches and points. You take it carefully. "What is this A prototype?" he says. "We tried once to make the sky fit into a dome, to turn it into a sphere." Historians still argue whether the Babylonians understood celestial spheres, or if this was just a primitive instrument. But the idea, the desire to take the three-dimensional heavens and tame them into something measurable, that impulse is timeless. Quirky tidbit 1. Recovered Babylonian tablet includes a description of a star that hums softly in the ear of the bull. Scholars debate whether this was poetic metaphor, a misidentified planet, or the first recorded attempt at audio astronomy. You place the object down gently. Your journey is done, but the stars, they keep going. Eden Sin stands groaning softly with age. It's late. You nod. It's early somewhere. He grins. Maybe. Maybe not. You walk together along the stone path that runs parallel to the canal, your feet brushing the cool ground. No words now. Just the wind, the ripple of water, and the steady presence of the constellations above. The final lesson isn't carved in clay. It's this. Even when they didn't understand the sky, the Babylonians watched it anyway. When they were afraid, they stared harder. When they were confused, they wrote more. When the heavens were silent, they pressed symbols into earth and called it faith. And tonight, under the same ancient stars, you carry a little of that forward. The city sleeps. You return to your mat in the temple's courtyard, pulling a woven blanket over your tired limbs. The torches are low. The scribes have long since gone quiet. Even the goats, for once, are mercifully still. Overhead, the sky stretches on immeasurable, impossible, and yet somehow familiar. You know its patterns now, its rhythms, its myths. You've walked the path of stars not with a telescope or a spacecraft, but with clay curiosity and a teacher whose sandals are held together with hope. The river's breath lulls you into stillness. You think about how many hands pressed symbols into clay, how many eyes followed Jupiter's arc, how many minds wondered if the stars were watching them back. And maybe they were. Maybe they still are. The stars won't speak tonight, but they don't need to. They've already told you everything they know through the hands of scribes, the hush of night, and the soft weight of knowledge fired into stone. Your eyes begin to close. The clay tablet sleeps beside you, and somewhere above, Venus blinks once and is gone. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Maybe by now you've already drifted off to sleep, and if so, we hope this story brought you peace of mind and helped you rest a little easier. Deep sleep makes life better, and we're truly happy to be part of that. Until next time, sweet dreams.